Warning, this video is not intended for persons underneath the age of 13. Thank you.
Test subject W-354, showing great promise. I've taken to calling it West. The Army may have made me forge this creature for war, but I believe that is so much more potential. This could be the dawn of a new species, and perhaps even a new age. I envision a world full of beings that need not to eat, or sleep, or breathe. Lab notes from Professor Jeffrey Bannister. Hey everybody, it's the Aries 1999, and today we're going to be continuing my series of basing a D&D game off of a specific monster type. So far we've done one for plant and for dragon. So today we are going to be doing construct. First we're going to be setting out the various settings and quest ideas for a construct game. Then talking about constructing a construct party. And lastly, we're going to be talking about the monsters, including retexturing other monsters to fit this theme. Now, there are a number of reasons why you might want to set the game in a heavily construct world. First, perhaps the party has traveled to the plane of Mechnus. This is a world of perfect clockwork inhabited by the Modrons. Perhaps they are seeking shelter from chaotic beings. Or perhaps they want counseling for a logics issue. Or maybe they ended up there by mistake. Regardless of individual character alignment, most parties are pretty chaotic, so this will definitely make for some interesting encounters. If you want to go for the Skyrim approach, maybe the party is in a long-abandoned dwarven citadel that's still guarded by automations that were built there centuries ago. Heck, maybe another dwarven clan sent the party down there to investigate the secrets of making sentinels that can survive so long. If you want to go for the Fallout approach, there's, of course, the robot sentinels that police New Vegas. There's the EDE companion, and of course, Mr. House himself. I already have 2 Fallout videos on this channel that I'll link to below, and definitely interested in doing more if you guys would want to see that. Perhaps you've got a mad science thing going on, and they are in the scientist's lab. At some point I want to do a whole mad scientist themed video, but for right now I'll say that this is going to be a great place to throw in some robots. The mad scientist who runs the dungeon could probably be using these for surveillance as well as protection. Next we have the party to build. This part of the video is of course for the players. Now the most obvious race here is the Warforged. These are artificially made humans. Now I want to make sure that I'm clear what I mean by this. While they are constructions, they do not have the construct creature type. They are still humanoids, not robots. This means that they can benefit from healing magic. Now they are about as tall and slightly heavier than Dragonborns for context, so compared to a human they're pretty big. But they're still humanoids. What else about these guys do you need to know? Well, they resist poison and are immune to all diseases. They don't need to eat or drink. And they don't need to breathe or sleep, although they do need to power down for a while as part of a long rest.
Why are you stopping?
I'm not some infernal machine. I'm human. I need food and rest.
There's no time for rest. But if it's food you need...
Instead of putting on armor, they just sort of absorb it into their personage, and they also get an extra proficiency in any tool or skill that they want. That quotation from the start of the video is a piece of lore from my main world. The Warforged were invented during a war between the dwarves and the gnomes. Professor Jeffrey Bannister was an artificer tasked with creating a new type of soldier that was strong enough to fight the dwarves. As for other constructed races, the Simic Hybrid fits in well here. This is based on having zoonotic upgrades for a human, a Vedokin, or an elf. Just a quick side note, this could actually be an interesting way to mix up a character a bit in the middle of a game. Perhaps you start out as a human, but you barely escape with your life from some dungeon, and so you go to get your missing body parts replaced with animal parts, and so this could be a way that your race naturally changes. And what these upgrades are is that, well, for one thing, they get dark vision, and they can also choose some animal upgrades. At level 1, they can glide, climb, or swim. At level 5, it's a bonus to armor class, grapple checks, or spitting. Now, in my Wizard of Oz homebrew video, I talked about a custom race for the Scarecrow and the Tin Man. Play the clip.
Let's start with the characters, shall we? Now there aren't any real fight scenes in the movie, so bear with me while I try to decide on their stats. Scarecrow is, well, a Scarecrow, which is a creature from the monster manual that we will need to edit. First thing, he's of course able to talk. He would keep his weakness to fire damage and the resistance to bludgeoning damage, but I don't really see why he should resist piercing and slashing damage. After all, if you cut him open, his hay would spill out. I know it doesn't make logical sense for a Scarecrow to get exhausted, paralyzed, poisoned, or unconscious, but he would be too powerful as a player character if he couldn't be. I will say that he doesn't need to sleep since he's, well, a Scarecrow, but he would still need to rest for 8 hours to get a full heal. No terrifying gaze ability, and his claw attack would only do 1d4 slashing damage. For racial bonuses, he would get a +2 to intelligence and a +1 to wisdom. As for a class, I guess he could be a ranger. The Tin Man would effectively be a metallic construct. Just like the Scarecrow, he can still become exhausted, paralyzed, etc. Won't need to sleep, but still needs to rest. For his class, he could be a fighter. His main weapon would be a wood axe that has the stats of a battle axe. He would also have built-in full plate armor, so don't forget that stealth disadvantage.
Yeah, when I was making the Tin Man, either I'd forgotten about Warforged or didn't know that they were a thing yet, but that also works as a good player race for them. Now for some backstory ideas, perhaps some character has a normal race but was made artificially by some arcanist and has to struggle with their unnatural existence. For extra fun, maybe they're a druid who has to try to seek a balance between the artificial and the natural. As for constructing classes, well, artificers first up, they're all about making things. The best subclass for this would be Battlesmith. At level 3, they can create a companion known as the Steel Defender that fights alongside you. These can be repaired by the Mending spell, so that'd definitely be a good cantrip for you to get. The Artillerist is also a good option. Instead of making the Steel Defender, they can make an Eldritch Cannon. That's right, Warlocks, what do you get? An Eldritch Blast? Well, these guys get a whole cannon. Next up is Sorcerer, specifically the Clockwork Soul. Their power comes from Mechanist, the Plane of Order. Perhaps you're an Aesimer that descends from the Primus. Or maybe you're a Warforged whose very soul and essence comes from Mechanist itself. These guys are all about using the power of that plane to protect them. Lastly, we have the Ghost in the Machine Warlock from the Modern Magic Unearthed Arcana. I will go more into this UA in a follow-up video to my modern day D&D, but for now, let's talk about these Warlocks. They draw on their power from a digital entity. This gives them access to all sorts of hacking tools. Their abilities let them overload computers to make them crash. They can teleport along wires, and they can protect their mind from being read and hack into someone else's mind. Let's talk about those monsters. One of the most iconic constructs is the animated armor. Just a suit of armor that's brought to life. Now, what's great about these is that they make for amazing ambush monsters. Imagine that your party is walking through a castle, and you describe that there are several rows of armor set up. This is nothing suspicious, it's just the decor of the castle. That is until the players prove themselves to be a threat to the castle and its inhabitants. Then they can all spring to life. This would actually make for a really great fight scene, as they have to run through the halls of the castle while being chased by all the statues around them. If you want, you can also use this as a template to make some miscellaneous constructs fitting with that theme of statues. Instead of armor, it's, a wax figurine.
A new security system! Voila! Do you like them, Barry the Platypus?
Get him!
I got them very cheap from a wax museum that went bankrupt.
Perhaps instead of that, it's just a regular robot, so you might want to make these slightly more powerful than the animated armor, since they don't have the false appearance feature. If you want to make them a bit tougher, perhaps they can fly around with rocket boots and cast the Eldritch Blast spell as a laser beam. Now, if the party is on the plane of Mechanist, they're likely to run into the Modron. These are beings of law and order that follow a 5-part hierarchy. To them, all of the Modron are part of one collective and work to achieve unified goals. Their CR only changes from 1/8 to up to 2, but since they fight in packs, they could be a serious threat for a significant portion of a campaign. Perhaps at higher levels, the party has to fight against an Order Cleric who commands a team of Modron. Then there are things like gargoyles, golems, and then the homunculi. These are creatures of the elements that spellcasters breathe life into. I would definitely encourage you to allow the party to find ways to make these creatures of their own. There is the Manual of Golems to make golems. The homunculus describes being a mixture of clay, ash, mandrake root, and blood with a magical ritual to animate them. Perhaps this could be like a second or third level animation spell that a spellcaster could come across. And now he's got, like, his own little homunculi helping him out. Last thing I want to talk about is constructifying some other monsters. What we're going to be using as an example is a mechanical dragon, a la Festus from the Heroes of Olympus series. So for our purposes, its stat block is mostly going to stay the same as, say, an adult red dragon, but with the following exceptions. For one thing, it's going to have the construct monster type. Instead of being immune to fire, it will have immunity to psychic damage and poison damage. And while we're at it, let's switch around those charisma and dexterity stats. So, it's really good at moving around, but it's not so great at interacting with people. Now, from a roleplay perspective, I would encourage letting the players learn how this machine operates. Perhaps, it has a reservoir of flammable gas that it uses for its breath attack. A machine like this would require an insane amount of power. So, if your campaign is at least part relic hunt, perhaps one of the relics is powering this. As a fun twist, maybe after the players slay the dragon, its power source goes critical, and they have to find the way to contain the explosion before they can claim the treasure for themselves. Now, I would encourage changing around a monster's typing anytime you need something that better fits your setting, or if you just have a fun new idea for a creature but you're not completely sure how to do it, just take from an existing template. This world is yours, and you don't have to run any of these creatures exactly the way they are in the book. Create your own and be derivative if you want to. So what do you guys think? Do you have any other construct ideas? Go ahead and put them down in the comments. In my Super Carlin Brother themed campaign, I have a Warforged cleric known as Life. This guy is a literal medbot who right now is struggling with some corrupted programming that he accidentally got in his system. Well, that's all I have for you guys today. Have a great day, and God bless.